29th September 1987, Goiânia, Goiás, Brazil. A medical physicist lowers a portable scintillation detector toward a small metal cylinder resting on a desk at the State Health Office. He expects background, perhaps 10 or 20 microgray per hour if the object is slightly unusual. The needle races off scale. At contact, the instrument reads dose rates in the order of millisieverts per hour, thousands of times higher than normal. Within 2 hours, national regulators confirm what the physicist already knows. Someone has brought a high-activity gamma source into a public building. Over the next 3 days, field teams will record ground-level dose rates up to 2 sieverts per hour at key sites, enough to deliver a potentially lethal whole-body dose in less than 60 minutes. More than 112,000 residents will be screened. 249 will be confirmed contaminated. 4 will die. They did not yet know that one hospital device, left in a disputed clinic, had just triggered the most serious urban radiological accident in history. The device arrives at Instituto Goiano de Radioterapia in 1977, 1 kilometre from Goiânia's administrative centre. Installers position the imported teletherapy unit in a dedicated treatment room. Paperwork confirms licensing under Brazil's Comissão Nacional de Energia Nuclear and International Source certification. The unit is a standard design, a rotating head with internal lead shielding, a cesium-137 source sealed in double stainless steel capsules, and mechanical interlocks to prevent accidental exposure. At installation, the source activity is approximately 74 terabecquerels, roughly 2,000 curies in older units, with a dose rate at 1 meter in the irradiation position of about 4.56 gray per hour. Over the next 8 years, the clinic operates normally. Patients receive fractionated doses. Technicians follow protocols. Regulators conduct periodic inspections. In 1985, IGR relocates to a new site. The teletherapy unit is not moved. The building enters a property dispute between the clinic's former owners and the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, which acquires the land. CNN is notified that the source remains in place. The State Insurance Institute IPASGO is warned. Court documents later show that by 1986, officials know there is radioactive material inside the abandoned structure. An IGR owner sends a letter stating that authorities will be responsible for what would happen with the cesium bomb. No action is taken. The building stands partially demolished, windows broken, walls damaged. The teletherapy head remains locked in a small room, protected by a padlock and little else. By mid-1987, the device designed to deliver controlled medical doses is effectively unattended, high-activity scrap. 13th September 1987, early afternoon. 2 scavengers, Roberto dos Santos Alves and Wagner Mota Pereira, enter the derelict IGR clinic through damaged walls. Warning signs remain on interior doors, but there is no guard, no active security, no barrier beyond broken masonry. CNN records still list the source as a licensed medical device. In reality, it is now accessible to anyone with basic tools. Roberto and Wagner have come for scrap metal. They find the teletherapy head bolted to a concrete block in a treatment room. Using hammers and a crowbar, they pry the assembly free. The head is heavy, approximately 50 kilograms, but manageable. They load it into a wheelbarrow and transport it roughly 600 meters to Roberto's home on Rua 57. The source capsule remains inside the head, surrounded by its built-in lead shielding, but as they begin dismantling the unit with improvised tools, shielding is compromised. Gamma dose rates at hand distance are later reconstructed in the several gray range over hours of work. Both men develop nausea, vomiting, and skin lesions within days. Local clinics initially attribute symptoms to common infections or food poisoning. Medical reports later confirm these are classic prodromal signs of acute radiation exposure. Neither man connects his illness to the metal object. The decision to remove the teletherapy head has moved tens of terabecquerels of cesium-137 from a semi-abandoned medical environment directly into a densely populated area with no radiological protection. By the end of the day, the highest activity source in Goiânia is not in a hospital vault. It is on the dirt floor of a private yard. 14th through 18th September 1987. Roberto's house, and then Junkyard 1, Goiânia. Over several days, family members and neighbours see the heavy device in Roberto's residence. Attempts to open it continue despite escalating illness. Roberto and Wagner use hammers, chisels, and screwdrivers. The assembly resists. Bolts jam. Metal bends but does not break cleanly. Both men grow weaker. On 18th September, Roberto decides to sell the unit. Scrap dealer Dever Alves Ferreira pays a small sum and transports the teletherapy head to his yard on Rua 15A. To Roberto, the unit is a cumbersome, disappointing piece of metal yielding little value. To radiation protection professionals, the same assembly would be treated as a high-risk source requiring shielded handling, lead containers, and controlled transport. The head is placed among other scrap. Workers continue to cut and pry at it, further degrading shielding. Dose reconstructions later identified Junkyard de Fran as a site with dose rates up to approximately 1.5 sieverts per hour in the most contaminated zone. That night, Dever notices a faint blue glow from a breach in the source capsule. He brings the assembly into his house. International Atomic Energy Agency analysis later notes uncertainty about the exact mechanism: air, fluorescence near an intense gamma field, Cherenkov-related phenomena, or a combination, but multiple witnesses confirm that a blue light was observed. Transfer to a busy scrapyard ensures the source will be handled, cut, and shared widely. An orphan source has become a city-wide contamination risk. The next step is no longer just dismantling metal. The glowing contents themselves become an object of curiosity and display. 21st through 24th September 1987. Junkyard the Warm and Ivo Ferreira's house, Goiânia. At night in the scrapyard, a worker uses a screwdriver to probe the damaged capsule. Small glowing grains fall out onto the workbench. To the scrap workers and family, the material appears decorative and harmless. For health physicists, each grain represents a concentrated gamma emitter, with activity in the megabecquerel scale. Worker identified in reports as EF1 removes several rice-sized grains of cesium chloride from the capsule on 21st September. Dever and relatives begin sharing grains with friends and neighbours. The powder's aesthetic appeal drives deliberate dissemination. Cesium chloride has a specific activity of approximately 814 terabecquerels per kilogram. A few grams at roughly 50 terabecquerels total activity can be divided into hundreds of individual hot particles. Material is transported to Ivo Ferreira's house, later designated Junkyard 2, where some is spread on a concrete floor. Official contamination maps later show Junkyard Vafers, Ivo's home, and a third junkyard as the most intense hotspots, with maximum dose rates up to 2 sieverts per hour at some locations. Curiosity transforms a single-point source into a diffuse pattern of high-activity microsources across several properties. Among those fascinated is 6-year-old Leida das Neves Ferreira. She plays on the contaminated floor at Ivo's house. She applies the glowing powder to her skin, rubbing it like body glitter. Dose reconstruction later estimates her whole body exposure at approximately 6 Gray. By the time symptoms appear, internal contamination from ingestion and inhalation compounds the external dose. 21st through 27th September 1987. Contaminated homes and local clinics, Goiânia. Waiting areas in neighbourhood clinics fill with patients from the same district. They report vomiting, dizziness, diarrhea, and unusual skin burns. Clinicians expect routine gastrointestinal illness or contact dermatitis. They are not primed to suspect radiation, particularly in a city with no operating nuclear facility. Initial diagnoses include food poisoning, allergic reactions, and tropical infections. Documented doses tell a different story. Leida das Neves Ferreira receives an estimated whole-body dose of approximately 6 Gray, 600 rad in older units, plus ingestion of roughly 1.0 gigabecquerel of cesium-137. Scrap workers, Admilson Alves de Souza receives approximately 5.3 Gray, Israel Batista dos Santos about 4.5 Gray. Several others fall in the 4.5 to 5.7 Gray range. Dose pathways are multiple. External exposure comes from gamma radiation emitted by grains on skin or nearby surfaces. Internal contamination occurs via ingestion or inhalation of cesium-137, which distributes primarily in soft tissue and muscle, acting as an internal gamma source with a biological half-life of approximately 70 days. Clinical literature and International Atomic Energy Agency reports note that whole-body doses above 0.7 Gray can produce detectable hematological changes. Doses above 4 Gray often lead to severe acute radiation syndrome without aggressive treatment. For comparison, a chest-computed tomography scan delivers approximately 5 to 7 millisieverts, 0.005 to 0.007 Gray. The patients now arriving at Goiânia clinics carry doses 1,000 times higher. Failure to recognize a radiological cause allows continued residence and play in highly contaminated rooms, compounding internal and external exposures. Blood tests begin to show lymphopenia in multiple patients from the same small neighborhood. The pattern is abnormal. The environmental cause remains unidentified. Mid through late September 1987, hospitals and clinics across Goiânia. Physicians review charts showing similar gastrointestinal and dermatological symptoms in patients who report no direct contact with each other. Most come from the Aeroporto and Ferroviarios districts. Medical staff expect ordinary infectious disease clusters, perhaps a contaminated food source or mosquito-borne pathogen. Yet some laboratory values are inconsistent with infection. Lymphocyte counts drop precipitously. White blood cell differentials show patterns more consistent with high-dose radiation exposure than with tropical disease. Brazilian medical journals later describe initial diagnoses for several future acute radiation syndrome cases: dermatitis, food poisoning, dengue-like fever. Hospital staff report fear and uncertainty when the word radiation is first mentioned days later, including reluctance to enter rooms of severely contaminated patients. No radiation detectors are in routine clinical use in Goiânia's hospitals. There is no local protocol for unexplained radiation-type injuries because no facility is formally known to handle significant sources in the area. Analyses of the Goiânia incident published by the International Atomic Energy Agency emphasize how the lack of clear radiation symbolism and effective warning barriers at the abandoned clinic contributed to both the initial theft and the delay in medical recognition. Without a radiological framework, doctors treat symptoms in isolation, antiemetics for nausea, topical ointments for burns, rehydration for diarrhea. The absence of a known source delays notification of CNEN and the switch to radiation-specific countermeasures such as Prussian blue for internal decontamination. The pattern finally triggers concern within the public health system when one family notices that everyone in their household and immediate neighborhood is sick at the same time. Maria Gabriela Ferreira, already symptomatic, decides to bring the mysterious scrap itself to authorities. She does not know she is carrying the key to an unsolved medical puzzle. 28th through 29th September 1987. Vigilancia Sanitaria and Initial CNEN Response Goiânia. Maria Gabriela Ferreira, already symptomatic, travels by bus to the State Health Office. She carries fragments of the source in a plastic bag. The bus and building are inadvertently contaminated. Staff at the health office expect to evaluate suspicious scrap for chemical or mechanical hazards at most. Radiation is not yet suspected. A visiting medical physicist applies a scintillation detector to the sample. The instrument shows intense activity at contact, far beyond background. Cesium-137 produces a characteristic photopeak at 662 kiloelectron volts. The count rate and dose rate conversion confirm that the material is highly radioactive. CNEN is notified immediately. An emergency radiological response is activated. By the end of 29th September, municipal, state, and federal authorities are aware. CNEN teams begin field measurements. They identify Junkyard 1, Junkyard 2, Roberto's house, and the health office as primary hotspots. Dose rates at some sites reach 2 sieverts per hour at contact. One instrument reading transforms an unexplained medical cluster into a defined radiological accident. International notification follows under the Convention on Early Notification of a Nuclear Accident. Structured emergency actions begin. Teams establish cordons around high-activity sites. Portable dose rate meters map gamma fields. Access is restricted. As night falls on 29th September, health physicists work under floodlights, moving through contaminated yards with shielded tools and protective clothing. Survey data reveal that a residential block now contains fields comparable at contact distance to high-dose industrial sources. The contrast is stark. A few days earlier, children played in these same yards. 30th September through early October 1987. Olympic Stadium and field posts, Goiânia. Residents queue at the city's football stadium, repurposed as a screening centre. Health physics technicians move down the lines with Geiger-Müller instruments and portal monitors. Public messaging aims to be reassuring. Most people are expected to show only background levels, yet authorities cannot predict how wide the contamination plume extends. CNN teams coordinate with local civil defense and military support. International Atomic Energy Agency advisors begin to follow the situation via international reporting channels. Screening proceeds systematically. Between 112,000 and 130,000 people are monitored. Of these, 249 are found contaminated. 49 require hospitalization. 21 need intensive care. The process uses handheld Geiger-Müller counters, portal monitors, and surface contamination criteria to decide on decontamination measures, clothing removal, washing, and further medical evaluation. International Atomic Energy Agency and Oak Ridge Associated University's case studies later highlight the stadium operation as an example of rapid, large-scale population screening in an urban radiological event. The screening filters a panicked population into uncontaminated, slightly contaminated, and heavily contaminated categories. This reduces unnecessary hospital load and focuses medical resources on those with significant exposures. By the time the last lines close, authorities know the approximate human scope of the accident. 249 people carry measurable contamination. 4 will eventually die of acute radiation syndrome. Dozens will require long-term medical follow-up. But the full environmental footprint, how many buildings, vehicles, and objects remain contaminated, is not yet mapped. Field teams prepare for the next phase. Systematic surveys, decontamination operations, and waste management on a scale the city has never seen. Early through mid-October 1987. Primary hotspots and airborne survey, Goiânia. Teams in protective suits move systematically through Junkyard Y, Junkyard 2 and associated sites. They carry high-range dose rate meters and shielded tongs. The public imagines a single radioactive object to be found and removed. Field data reveal a complex pattern of dispersed microsources in soil, dust, and building materials. Large remaining fragments of the cesium-137 capsule are identified. They are placed in shielded lead containers and removed under military guard. Transport vehicles move through cordoned streets to temporary storage facilities. Activity balance calculations provide the scale of dispersion. Of 50.9 terabecquerels present at the time of theft, approximately 44 terabecquerels are recovered as solid source material or high-activity fragments. Roughly 7 terabecquerels remain dispersed in the environment. Airborne radiometric surveys are flown over the city. Detectors mounted on helicopters and small aircraft identify elevated count rates over neighborhoods. Brazilian and international reports describe how aerial and ground surveys are used together to map contamination and rank sites for cleanup priority. Recovering large fragments sharply reduces high-dose hotspots, but mapping ensures that less intense but widely spread contamination is not overlooked. Survey data confirm a troubling reality. Some house lots and yards now have cesium-137 profiles that cannot be remediated with surface cleaning alone. Contamination has penetrated porous materials, adobe, wood, unsealed concrete. In some locations, cesium chloride's high solubility has allowed it to migrate into soil layers 10 to 40 centimeters below the surface. Simple washing will not suffice. Demolition and excavation become necessary. The scope of required work expands with each survey pass. October through December 1987. Demolition sites and Abadia de Goiás disposal facility, Goiás State. A contaminated house stands empty behind barriers. Crews move through rooms, bagging personal items and checking them with detectors. Measurements show persistent contamination in porous materials and subsurface soils. Residents often expect simple washing to solve the problem. Dose rates tell a different story. Approximately 49 houses are heavily decontaminated or demolished. Around 3,500 to 4,500 metric tons of contaminated soil, construction materials and waste are removed. All of it is shipped to a new engineered repository at Abadia de Goiás. Decontamination procedures vary by surface type. Floors are vacuumed, scrubbed with acid solutions, and treated with Prussian blue compounds that bind cesium ions. Plumbing is checked for contaminated water. Painted surfaces are scraped. In cases where contamination has penetrated deep into adobe or wood, demolition is the only option. The repository at Abadia de Goiás is designed for long-term containment. It features a multi-barrier disposal structure, engineered for a cesium-137 inventory with a 30-year half-life. Monitoring wells surround the facility. Environmental surveillance programs are established to assure containment over decades. International Atomic Energy Agency commentary notes that from a psychological standpoint, more effort could have been made to decontaminate personal valuables, jewelry, photographs, heirlooms, rather than discard them. The comment highlights the human dimension of radiological waste decisions. Each bag of contaminated belongings represents not just becquerels and dose estimates, but memories and family history. Cleanup decisions balance radiological safety, technical feasibility, cost, and public confidence, while generating a long-term waste legacy that requires continued monitoring. Empty cleared lots and fenced disposal cells become permanent physical markers of a few days of uncontrolled scrap handling. October 1987 onward, Goiânia and Rio de Janeiro hospitals, follow-up programs. Isolation rooms house the most heavily exposed patients. Staff use barrier nursing and strict infection control protocols. International experts review dose estimates and clinical timelines. Before the accident, local hospitals had no experience with high-dose acute radiation syndrome cases. Now, they manage dozens of patients requiring complex hematologic, dermatologic, and infection control care. 46 of the most heavily exposed people receive detailed dose reconstructions and clinical monitoring. 4 die from acute radiation syndrome. Leida das Neves Ferreira, estimated whole-body dose 6 Gray, dies on 23rd October. 3 scrap workers with doses between 4.5 and 5.3 Gray also succumb despite intensive treatment. Medical teams use Prussian blue, ferric hexacyanoferrite, as a decorporation agent to reduce internal cesium-137 burden. Studies show that treated patients experience average committed dose reductions of approximately 71%. Prussian blue works by binding cesium in the gastrointestinal tract, interrupting enterohepatic recirculation and accelerating fecal excretion. Supportive care includes blood component therapy to address bone marrow suppression, antibiotics to prevent opportunistic infections, aggressive fluid management, and skin grafting in some cases where beta burns and tissue damage are severe. Long-term follow-up programs are established for exposed individuals. These include cytogenetic analyses, chromosome aberration studies to confirm dose estimates, and cancer surveillance over decades. Clinical outcomes from Goiânia inform international guidance on acute radiation syndrome management and decorporation therapy. The case becomes a core medical reference in radiological emergency preparedness. Even after acute treatment ends, regular checkups and laboratory tests continue. Goiânia's victims become some of the most closely monitored radiation-exposed cohorts in the world. Their medical data contribute to understanding dose-response relationships, late effects, and the long-term efficacy of early interventions. Late 1980s through 1990s, Goiânia and Abadia de Goiás. Years after the accident, health physics teams still perform periodic measurements on streets and lots once listed as contaminated. Instruments now show levels near background. Technically, decontamination and radioactive decay have brought dose rates within acceptable limits. Socially, stigma persists. Some residents and products from Goiânia face avoidance in other parts of Brazil. Soil studies show residual cesium-137 largely confined to deeper layers, 10 to 40 centimeters, under cleaned surfaces. Most initial activity had been in the top few centimeters, supporting the decision for topsoil removal. Papers and official reports note ongoing psychosocial effects. fear, discrimination, and demands for certification of non-contamination long after dose levels fall below health concern thresholds. Technical recovery does not automatically restore public confidence. Risk perception, media framing, and incomplete risk communication extend the accident's impact beyond radiological metrics. In risk communication literature, Goiânia becomes a prominent example of how the semiotics of danger and symbol design can fail or succeed in conveying radiation risks. The incident prompts the International Atomic Energy Agency to develop new supplementary warning symbols for high-activity sealed sources, symbols designed to be understood across cultures and literacy levels. The goal is to prevent future accidents by making danger unmistakable. Late 1980s through 2000s, Brazil, International Atomic Energy Agency, and International Regulatory Foray. Training sessions at the International Atomic Energy Agency show slides of Goiânia scrap yards, contamination maps, and patient data. Regulators from multiple countries are briefed on the case. Before 1987, regulatory focus and emergency planning centered on reactors and large nuclear facilities. Goiânia demonstrates that a single medical teletherapy source in scrap metal can produce an international nuclear event scale level 5 event, an accident with wider consequences. Brazil revises source control regulations. Stronger licensing requirements are imposed. Inventory tracking systems are enhanced. Rules for decommissioning and clinic closure become more stringent. Physical security for high-activity sources is tightened. The International Atomic Energy Agency incorporates Goiânia into safety standards and guidance on orphan sources, scrap metal monitoring, and the new enhanced radiation warning symbols for sealed sources. One 50.9 terabecquerel cesium-137 source left in a disputed building produced 4 deaths, 249 contaminated individuals, screening of over 100,000 residents, demolition of dozens of houses, and long-term storage of several thousand metric tons of contaminated waste. Goiânia becomes a reference case in international discussions of radiological terrorism, dirty bomb risk, and the necessity of strict cradle-to-grave control of high-activity sources. The film closes on a documented lesson repeatedly cited by regulators worldwide. Nuclear and radiological safety does not end when a facility stops operating. It ends only when every high-activity source is accounted for, secured, and removed.